Hello, my name is Anna and I love trying vintage recipes. So today I'm trying 3 BISQUICK recipes from the 1970s. Today's recipes come to us from Betty Crocker's BISQUICK Cookbook. This book was originally published in 1971 and I'll talk more about it a little bit later. I know that many of my viewers are familiar with BISQUICK. A lot of you probably even have a box in your pantry right now. But whenever I do BISQUICK recipes on my channel, I do get some questions from people who live outside the US about what is it? What is BISQUICK? BISQUICK is a shelf-stable baking mix that you can use to make all kinds of sweet and savory things. Often people use it to make pancakes, biscuits, waffles, etc. But you can use it in a lot of different types of recipes, both sweet and savory, as I'm about to show you. I picked this book up right before I had surgery at one of my favorite little shops. It was one of my last outings, before I was gonna be kind of cooped up for a few weeks. Now, I'm in several cookbook-related Facebook groups, and recently, like in the last few weeks, this book keeps coming up. Like, people keep posting about this book. Oh, I just found it. Oh, I have it. And I just took it as a sign that I had to share this book on my channel and try some of the recipes. All right, let's make some pepperoni squares. I chose this recipe because there is an ingredient in there that makes me think, how does this fit in? How does this support the rest of the recipe? How is it going to taste? And it might not make a difference at all. Maybe I'm not even gonna notice it. Maybe it's an essential ingredient, or maybe it's something that I'm not gonna love. Who's to say? That's why I do these recipes, to find this stuff out. So I am cutting this recipe in half oftentimes I do that. So this recipe starts with a cup of BISQUICK. And basically it says mix all ingredients except butter. All the ingredients include, this is the ingredient that I'm like, it is a hard cooked egg that I've chopped up. I don't know. Not exactly sure how it fits in here, but we'll see. Some chopped pepperoni. I took some sandwich pepperoni that I had in the fridge and chopped that up. I didn't have like the whole pepperoni that you can like chop into little cubes. I'm sure this will be fine. Just gonna kind of mix that in a little. This recipe comes to us from the appetizers section. So this is something you can serve when you're having guests over, right? Or for a little snack for yourself. I also have some dried minced onion. You had the option of using dried minced onion and fresh onion. I went with the dried minced option. Some oregano, very pizza forward flavors, and just a little pepper. I've got all that good stuff in there. And then finally I have some milk. And this is going to form a dough according to the recipe. Well, I'd say it's a dough if you look at it. My initial thought about that hard cooked egg is that maybe it adds like a little bit of like a rich flavor with the cooked yolks. I even like triple checked this to make sure that it said a hard cooked egg, not just an egg. So if I were to make the full recipe, it would go into a 9 by 9 by 2 inch pan. Since I'm cutting the recipe in half, I found that these little 1 quart Corelle-ware dishes work really, really well for something like this. And I'm gonna be making this in my toaster oven. I'm on such a toaster oven kick lately. This has been greased, so I'm gonna put my dough in here. Not a huge amount of dough. I'm gonna try to spread this out. I brought in a smaller spatula to see if I can help the big spatula. And I gotta say, I'm just gonna say it, this is not the most attractive thing yet. Maybe when it bakes, it's gonna turn into something gorgeous, but right now I'm not so sure. Yeah, this little tiny spatula that's like a little bit firmer is very much helping. Before I bake this, I need to brush it with a little bit of softened or melted butter. It's like half melted, half softened. Okay, that's what we've got. I'm not sure. So now I have to bake this at 450 degrees for 15 to 20 minutes, and I am gonna do this in my toaster oven and see how it turns out. I'd like to thank Blueland for sponsoring today's video. I am in the kitchen a lot, cooking and trying recipes for this channel. So as you can imagine, I am washing my hands all the time and I am doing dishes all the time. Fortunately, Blueland has some great products that help me with both. Blueland offers cleaning and personal care products made from plant-based and planet-friendly ingredients. There's no single-use plastic in any component of their products. Bottles, packaging, shipping materials, no single-use plastic in any of it. Their products are super easy to use. So for the hand soap, they send you this glass bottle. It's really nice. It's reusable, of course. You fill the glass bottle with hot water up to the line. You take one of the tablets. They come in a few different scents. I love this Perrine lemon one. It is so fresh. It is so nice smelling, but it's very light. And you just let that dissolve in the bottle. And then once it's completely dissolved, you just replace the top and it turns into this like luxurious, super foamy, nice hand soap. I personally prefer foaming hand soap, so this is perfect for me. And for the dishwasher tablets, you simply put one in your dishwasher and wash your dishes, and it works really, really well. I also love the container that they provide to store the dishwasher tablets. I just think it's really cute. Their products are also affordable. For example, the hand soap tablets work out to just $2.25 a piece when you set up a subscription. You can stock up and it doesn't take up a ton of space. So I'm basically holding 5 bottles of hand soap in one hand right now. If you're ready to give Blueland a try, they're sharing a special offer just for my viewers. Click the link in my description down below, or scan the QR code that's on the screen right now, and you can get 15% off your first kit. Thank you again to Blueland for sponsoring today's video. What I really wanted to do was try to slide all of this out onto a cutting board and cut it into squares. It didn't happen that way. It started to kind of fall apart a little bit, and I think it's just because there's like so many bits of egg and pepperoni and stuff in there. You know, it doesn't make it the smoothest texture. And that's okay, that's okay. We'll cut it right out of here and I'll try it that way. The pepperoni smells incredible baking, of course. I think if you're baking pepperoni in an oven or whatever, like it's gonna smell good. You know, and it has the oregano in there and the dried onion. I'm gonna cut this, I think I'm gonna cut it into 6ths because the full recipe is supposed to be between 9 and 12 servings. So I guess it just depends on how you cut it. Ooh, okay, well that just fell apart a little bit. Yeah, it's a very, like, the texture is a little crumbly. Okay. It tastes like a flavored biscuit, because that's kind of what it is. I'm not really getting the egg, though. The egg's not, like, making it bad, but it's not making it good either for me. Also, because the texture is so biscuity and crumbly, kind of like a Cheddar Bay biscuit, really. I'm thinking, just make these into biscuits, like drop biscuits. I wouldn't personally, I don't think I would make this, bake it in a pan, and then cut it into squares because it's just not holding together the way that I want it to. I kind of think it would be much better if you mixed it all up and then dropped the biscuits on a baking tray with some parchment paper or something and then baked it off that way. I think that would work much better if you wanted to do like a seasoned, kind of like different kind of biscuit. It's not bad, but it's not anything that I would demand to have at a party or just absolutely need, you know? Instead of an appetizer, I think this could like really go well to accompany a bowl of soup. That's where I'm seeing it. I'm not really seeing it as an appetizer for a party. Maybe if you made like teeny tiny little drop biscuits or something and then put some garlic butter on them. I'm just coming up with ideas here. Still not sure about the egg though. I saw this recipe for turkey pot pie and knew that I had to try it, but I'm telling you right now, I'm using chicken because I don't have turkey. I am cutting this recipe in half, so I have a bit of butter here. I'm gonna melt that. Butter is all melted and I'm gonna add some chopped onion and let it cook for a few minutes. The onion has softened, so now I'm gonna add my BISQUICK baking mix. So this is gonna serve as a thickener to my sauce, to my filling. A lot like flour, of course. And I can add my salt and pepper now as well. So salt and pepper, we'll mix that together. So that is mixed together. It's cooked for just a minute or two, and I'm gonna add chicken broth. And it says light cream in the recipe. I just went with half and half. I don't always see light cream in my stores. It doesn't always appear in the dairy section. Funny thing, I noticed when we lived in California, I could always find light cream, like specifically labeled, but I don't see it much here. I'm gonna switch over to my twist whisk and just kind of break up any of the lumps that are in there. Oh yeah, I can feel that thickening up now. And now I just have a little bit of Leon Perrins. Oops, and some diced pimento. Love the color of that. So I'm gonna turn the heat off and whisk that in. You can see we have a nice, thick, creamy base here. And now I can add my chicken. This is just shredded chicken from a rotisserie chicken I bought earlier today. Sometimes you gotta take a shortcut, right? So that's the filling. I'm gonna set this aside and work on the top pastry of my chicken pot pie. So now I'm going to make the pastry topping, or biscuit topping. I don't know what it's gonna be. Anyway, I'm making it, and it starts with some Bisquick in a bowl. And I have just some vegetable shortening here. I'm gonna cut that in just a bit. That's what it's looking like at the moment. kind of like crumbly sand. So now I'm adding some milk, stirring that together. And what's supposed to happen is that this is supposed to come together to form a dough, which it is. I mean, it's getting more and more cohesive in there. I'm gonna dump this out on my counter and attempt to knead this a little bit until it holds together. It says 5 times. I've kind of lost count. It hasn't been too much more than that, I don't think. And actually, it is holding together very well. So I'm pleased about that. So this is the casserole dish I am gonna use. Maybe you recognize this pattern. This is Spice of Life, and it is a 1 quart casserole dish. Perfect size, should be perfect size for making half of this recipe. I'm gonna put the filling in here first. And it does say ungreased casserole dish, by the way. So I didn't grease it. That did fill that pretty much perfectly. Ooh. And I did get a rolling pin. It says to roll or pat this into a size that can cover that. The original casserole dish that I was supposed to use if I made a full recipe was 11 by 7, which is about 2.2 quarts. So let's just do our best, shall we? Get out of the way for a second. Okay, feeling okay about it. Okay, hey. Not mad about it. We're just gonna see if I can get some help from one of my dough scrapers. These are great and they are super inexpensive. Use them for a lot of different things, including when I'm making like pizza dough. It's a big help. Nice. Okay, I know it's not perfect, okay? But I'm pretty happy about that. I'm pretty happy with how it looks. It's a little down home, a little earthy, a little rustic. Maybe I'll just put a little, we'll take some from here and patch it over here and it'll be fine. Okay, do I have a knife handy? I don't. I have to cut some slits in the top of this to let it vent. Okay, cute. I think it's looking pretty much the way it's supposed to. It says to bake this at 450 degrees for about 15 minutes. I'm gonna keep an eye on it and I'll let you know how it goes. Okay, so I personally think this looks pretty great. Got nice and brown on the top. When it came out of the oven, it was so bubbly and it smells really good. I'm gonna plate just a little bit of this up here. Yeah, that crust at the top, it's like a pie crust. It's nice, it's crackly. Looks like it's supposed to look like, I think. Yeah, wow. Still very hot inside. I did let this cool for a few minutes while I took a thumbnail. You know, it's probably been about 5 minutes or so. Lovely amount of filling. This recipe is a little bit similar to the recipe that I posted, I don't know, a couple of years ago now, for the chicken pot pie that I make in, you know, individual servings. So that's why I wanted to try it. It's pretty close. I put more vegetables in mine. There's not really very many in this one at all, but I wanted to taste it and see how it is with the Bisquick versus what I usually do, which is puff pastry. We gotta get a bite of the Bisquick. Gotta get a bite of the chicken filling, turkey filling, if it's Thanksgiving. That's kind of like the section of the book that this recipe is in. This would be great for like leftover chicken or turkey as well. I like that. I actually really like the pie crust kind of topping. Now, I think if I had made the full recipe and I had tried to pat it or roll it into that 11 by 7 shape, I don't know if I would have been as successful, but this little 1 quart square casserole dish size, it's like the perfect amount of food for us, and it was much easier for me to make this shape than it would be for like a big pan, I think. But yeah, I really like this. I'll probably make it again because I always have Bisquick in my pantry. I'm wrapping things up with the dessert, and that is this peachy pudding bake. Because it's peach season right now and peaches are so incredibly good. I have been buying them every single week at a local produce stand. I have one with breakfast every single day, and I'm gonna continue to eat them for as long as they last because, oh, they're so delicious right now. So this recipe is incredibly simple. I hope it turns out well because if it does, like, this is gonna be a good one. It starts with some peeled sliced peaches. These are fresh peaches. If you've never peeled a peach before, it's very similar to the way that I showed you how to peel tomatoes a couple of videos back. First, you need to get a pan of simmering water going on your stovetop. And then you take your ripe, fresh peaches and drop them into the simmering water for about 30 seconds. Remove your peaches and put them in an ice bath. And then when you remove them from the ice bath, you can kind of make a little cut if you need to get the skin started, but it starts to peel right away, just like I showed you with those tomatoes. And then you end up with this. So I already peeled and sliced these, and this recipe only has a few ingredients besides the peaches. The first thing I have to do is stir in my brown sugar. And it says you can use brown or white sugar. I just opted for brown. You need to stir that in, and then you're gonna let this sit for about 10 minutes. And that's gonna cause the peaches to give up a lot of juice. That's gonna be your liquid in this recipe because there's nothing else. It's just sugar, some Bisquick, and a little bit of nutmeg. So I'm gonna let this sit for a while and I'll be right back. Okay, 10 minutes later, this is not like the easiest thing to capture, but there's a lot of syrupy kind of liquid in there. Let this stand for 10 minutes, so now all I have to do is stir in the Bisquick and the nutmeg. You know, not everyone loves nutmeg, so maybe you can substitute cinnamon. Well, it is forming some batter in here with that liquid. Turn fruit mixture into a greased pan, and again, this would have made a 9x9 pan if I'd made the full recipe. I'm making half recipe, so I'm using one of my little Corelware 1-quart dishes. That's it. That's all. What is that? 3 ingredients? 4 ingredients. Not too bad for dessert, especially if this turns out well. Now I have to bake this for 30 to 35 minutes in a 425-degree oven. There it is. It says you can serve this with vanilla ice cream. I'm gonna try it first without, because I think I should. All right, what do we got going on in here? It's like cakey on the top, little saucy underneath. It's reminding me a lot of that cherry cobbler I made for my 4-H video, except there was no like boiling water or anything. Let me get my glove here. Still very warm. I did let it cool for a few minutes. I kind of feel like this is gonna be somewhat, I don't know how to describe it, a little, almost like the top under, like directly underneath is gonna be a little chewy almost. Let's see, let's see. That's pretty good. That is pretty good. I mean, those peaches, let's just be honest, probably do a lot of heavy lifting here. They're so good. That's delightful. Probably even more so with vanilla ice cream or whipped cream. That's good. That's very easy. I would make this again. Like I said, the peaches I used were stellar. But if it's not peach season where you are, I think you could probably use like canned or maybe like frozen and thawed peaches just to make this a little bit easier. It does taste very good and it is very easy to make. Betty Crocker's Bisquick cookbook was published in 1971. 7 mini cookbooks in one with step-by-step recipes, because that's what it says here. So I think that possibly the different chapters in this book were at one time like promotional pamphlets for Bisquick, and then they decided to compile them into this really cool book. Like, I just love the shape of it. It's kind of different than a lot of other Betty Crocker cookbooks. It's a little bit of a binder style. You can't actually open this binder, but that's another thing I love about it. It's so interesting to me. As I mentioned in the opening of my video, this book keeps popping up in some of the cookbook groups that I'm in over on Facebook. One of my fellow members, Janelle, hi, she actually posted her copy in the group, and the person who owned it before her had like checked off a bunch of recipes and made notes and said like, this one's really good, you should try this one. So one of the recipes I chose to make today is actually one of the recipes that was recommended by the previous owner of her copy of this cookbook. And I'll tell you which one that is in a little bit. I have a few other Bisquick videos here on my channel because Bisquick has been around for quite some time. It was introduced in 1931 by General Mills. I even have, I think in the last Bisquick video I did, I have like a little bit of a history of Bisquick, so I'm not gonna go over it too much, but if you wanna learn more, you can certainly watch that video if you haven't already. A link in the description down below. And then a lot of other creators have kind of covered the history of Bisquick as well. One particular dish I think a lot of people think about when they think about Bisquick, like outside of pancakes and waffles and things, would be impossible pies. You're not gonna find anything called an impossible pie in here. Just to quickly give you an idea of what that even is, it's kind of like a mix, dump, and bake recipe, and usually it results in something like a sweet coconut pie or maybe like an egg and vegetable quiche, and it's where like the Bisquick actually makes its own crust on the bottom. General Mills didn't actually start using the term impossible pies until the late 70s. How do you even know that? Where do you get your information? I'll tell you. It's the BISQUICK banner. If you are one of my patrons, you already know that I got 2 copies of the BISQUICK banner when I bought this cookbook. They were tucked inside. And the BISQUICK banner was like an every other month newsletter that came with recipe cards. So it was like a subscription service. You got the recipe cards, you'd put them in a box, and then you'd get one of these newsletters with little, you know, there were some recipes in here, there were all kinds of things. I actually did a full flip through of both of these over on my Patreon. So if you want to see that, you're gonna have to go over there. So it actually says in this little column about impossible pies right here, it says, since the first impossible pie recipe using BISQUICK baking mix was published on a recipe card back in 1978, it's been nearly impossible to keep up with the number of impossible pie recipes developed in our kitchens or by banner readers and consumers across the country. Something that was similar to an impossible pie, or actually was what we now call an impossible pie, existed. They didn't actually use that term until the late 70s, so you're not gonna see one in here because this was compiled and published in 1971. So there's a really cute, fun opening here, and I think it kind of like really sets the tone for a lot of Betty Crocker recipes. It says, for the woman who's practical enough to take a shortcut and creative enough to make the most of it. This book is divided into 7 chapters: holiday recipes, thrifty menus, entertaining, mobile meals, so like outdoor meals. And I really like the inside cover, and it's just, it's so 70s. It says BISQUICK baking mix like over and over and over. When you open to one of the first pages of the book, you are treated to a photograph of what a BISQUICK box would have looked like back in the early 70s. That's one of the things I really like about branded cookbooks from the past, is that a lot of times you get to see packaging from that time. So this is what the current packaging looks like. You can compare that to the packaging of the past. I think this is a little bit more bold. The font on this is kind of scrawly and carefree. I love nostalgic things, so I think I probably like this one a little bit better. I'm gonna put this on my bookshelf. I'm gonna forget that this is here, and then I'm gonna wonder in a couple of days why I put a box of BISQUICK on my bookshelf. Lots and lots of great photographs in here. This is a white Christmas pie. I actually made a white Christmas pie a few years ago. It was not this exact recipe. We kick things off with some holiday hospitalities. It's not just Christmas. There's quite a bit of like wintry holiday stuff in here, but there's also some things for Valentine's Day. That's a baked Alaska. Some Easter recipes in here. President's Day. Oh wow, look at these cute little jack-o'-lantern cupcakes. I love that. Halloween's a-coming. And then we move on to the strictly thrifty menus, so money-saving meals. I think no matter when you were born, what decades you've lived through, there's always been a need for strictly thrifty meals. So I almost made this one. This is like their version of pigs in a blanket. There's savory things in here, like those pigs in a blanket, potato pancakes, ham upside down casserole. There's also desserts like cherry cobbler, apricot jam cake, and the peachy pudding bake that I made for this video. This is actually the recipe that was recommended by the previous owner of Janelle's copy of this book. I like this for mobile meals. Looks like some little pizzas on the grill. Anything from campfire cooking, outdoor grilling, patio parties, picnics, camping. Ooh, we have a campfire cheese fondue. Anything outdoors. This looks like meatballs and waffles, but I'm like not exactly sure if I'm completely correct there. Oh no, they're sausage balls. So it's like waffles with sausage balls and then syrup. Sure, why not? So this is from the love and friendship section. So this is like get-togethers, brunches, breakfasts, coffee sweets. So having coffee with your friends and neighbors. I thought these really looked delicious too. This was definitely a contender for this video. These are banana butterscotch sticky buns. In the back of the book, they do have a little section called Baking Basics. It outlines all of the different like basic uses, basic recipes that you can use BISQUICK to make. So your biscuits, coffee cake, shortcakes, dumplings, waffles, pancakes, and velvet crumb cake. So the recipes that I chose to make today. First recipe was for pepperoni squares. They weren't bad. They weren't bad. They just weren't exciting. And I think that the application here was a little bit weird. They would make fine biscuits, okay? So like a drop biscuit, not necessarily one that you have to roll out and cut, but one that you can just like mix up and then drop and bake that way. I'm not really sure exactly why it was in the appetizer section. As they were baked like in a pan that way, they weren't the easiest to pick up. They just kind of fell apart a little bit. I even let them cool for longer and tried again just to see if maybe, you know, they were still too warm. It still didn't work out that well. The taste was okay. The taste was okay because pepperoni and oregano and stuff, that's gonna be good. The egg was weird. I did cut the egg in pretty small pieces. Like there were a few that kind of like didn't make it as small, but the egg, the hard cooked egg didn't really like add anything for me. And the pieces that I didn't cut quite as small, like especially the egg white part, it got a little, the texture got a little rubbery in the oven. I don't know. I don't know about this one. It wasn't like the most terrible thing I've ever eaten, but I don't think it's something that I'm going to be like rushing to make again without some changes. If I wanted to sort of rethink this recipe, not make it an appetizer, but make it like a bread, so like a bread basket thing to accompany a meal, like a stew or soup or something like that. Make it as drop biscuits, maybe brush some garlic butter on top. And then I think you're in business. I think then it just like makes more sense. But as it was described as sort of like an appetizer that you'd cut into squares and pick up, it didn't really like do much for me. Like I said, these were definitely not the most terrible thing I've ever eaten or made on this channel or anything. They just weren't like super exciting, especially after the like run of terrific recipes that I've had in the last few videos if you've been watching. So the second recipe I made was in the holiday hospitality section. It was for turkey pot pie, and I just used rotisserie chicken, and it was so good. It was pretty similar to the one that I already make with a few little changes. The one that I usually make, I top with puff pastry, not Bisquick, and I usually add some extra vegetables to mine. But this was super delicious. I actually liked the topping. It was kind of like a crispy-ish pie crust top, but then like underneath it was a little bit fluffier, like a biscuit. So normally like when I make chicken pot pie, I use flour to thicken it. This used a little bit of the Bisquick baking mix as a thickening. That made the sauce or the gravy like a little bit heavier, I think, but it still tasted really, really good. It was just different from what I normally would do. I would probably make this again, but I would sort of like mash up my recipe and this one. But really, I was pleasantly surprised by how much I enjoyed this one. I baked it in one of those little square 1-quart casserole dishes, and it was the perfect amount for just like the two of us for dinner. I definitely add some peas and carrots though. You could add whatever vegetables you like, but that's usually what I go for. And this would be an excellent way to use up leftover turkey after Thanksgiving or after Christmas or what have you. The third recipe I made was peachy pudding bake. This was a really good one too. I think thanks in part to the very excellent peaches that I picked up at the produce stand because they are in season right now. And it was so easy and so good. It really didn't have a lot of ingredients in it, and definitely something that you could throw together very quickly. I did have a little bit of vanilla ice cream with it. After I tasted it initially, I did get a little scoop of vanilla ice cream, and it was just like even better. The nutmeg like didn't make much of a difference to me. I think I would swap it out for cinnamon just because I love cinnamon and I think it goes really well with peaches. Peaches are in season right now, like I said, but you know, once the season ends, if you want to make this recipe, I think you could easily use some canned peaches or some frozen peaches that you've thawed out. It might not be quite as wonderful as what I had today, but I think it would still be tasty and still a super easy dessert that you could put together so fast with things that you just kind of like have. So I hope you enjoyed watching this video, and I hope maybe it gave you a few ideas on what to do with that box of Bisquick that's sitting in your pantry. If you love cookbooks and recipes from the 1970s, I have an entire playlist and I'll link it in the description down below. I'm also over on Patreon, so if you'd like to support me over there, I'll leave a link in the description so you can do that. Thanks again for watching, and I will see you in my next video. Bye.